Hey guys, Samim here. So I just wanted to talk about um, the fun of pitch decks and fundraising and all of the deeply inefficient and performative things that startup founders have to go through. So if you're a startup founder, you've probably had to jump through a couple of hoops before that were redundant. Maybe you had to make a pitch deck that wasn't even really accurate to what you're trying to build, just to be able to catch the attention of an investor. Um, Maybe you're an investor who has looked at so many pitch decks that you can't even really remember one from another. And you are kicking yourself because you've noticed that, so and so company has started to succeed or do well, and you maybe missed the opportunity to invest in that company. But uh, it wasn't because you didn't even look at their pitch deck or didn't consider them. It was because the version of what they were building that you saw before was so different than what you're doing today, what they're doing today, that there's no way you could have known that this was going to be the business that they're doing. So yeah, it's always funny to me because pitch decks are, especially in the age of AI, pitch decks for founders and startups are so outdated because they're essentially just fickle stories that are made up to attract an audience, their sales pitch, right? And they aren't even read or really like consumed that much anymore because there's just so many of them. I know many investors are just tired of looking at pitch decks. I know many investors don't even look at pitch decks because they're like, I don't want to hear your fancy full story. I want to just ask you a few very simple questions and get a sense based on how you react and your personality as to what it is that you're doing. And so it's funny because I feel like pitch decks are a thing of the past, and in the future, startups and entrepreneurship isn't going to be about making the nicest 10 slides, especially in the age of AI slop, right? I think it's going to be a lot more human, and it's all going to be a lot more data driven. So similar to other industries where we've had more data, I think that entrepreneurship, especially early stage entrepreneurship, is going to go through an evolution of data. Um, I guess you could say analytics, and we're going to see that a lot of startups are um, not going to be making antiquated pitch decks or trying to create some pretty slideshow for an ADHD investor to grab their attention. They're going to be presenting objective metrics that are much harder to fake and that are a lot more dynamic over time, um, that those investors can trust more easily and that they can understand. So I think it's a very interesting time to be a founder because we're seeing the death of the pitch deck. We're seeing that many investors don't even look at pitch decks anymore. They just want to talk to you for 5 minutes, ask you a few simple questions, see how you react, see where the conversation goes, and from there they can glean more about whether they want to work with you. And this goes for more than just investors, right? It could go for future teammates, programs that you're applying to, but it's very hard to get those 5 minutes with someone. So how can you condense this really high quality data or this really high quality signal that you want to communicate to an investor or to anybody in such a short period of time, and do it in a way that is not going to be as played out as a pitch deck, right? Pitch decks are uh, essentially becoming a commodity. I can create a pitch deck for you right now in 1 minute using AI tools, and there's very little in the way of verifying whether anything I write in that pitch deck is true. So pitch decks are really losing their value and their credibility, and I know a lot of investors are looking at different ways to evaluate early stage startups, especially nowadays that there's so many more early stage startups. So um, yeah, I think it's a problem that we're interested in at SIFT because as we make entrepreneurship more accessible, and as we decentralize success for more and more founders, um, it's only going to increase the, uh, I guess you could say, flood of supply of founders and startups to a very limited ecosystem of capital, of mentorship, of support, that already is unable to service 99% of its market. So, um, yeah, for us at SIFT, it's always about how do we help the 99% of founders and how do we help the 99% of startups who want to um, maybe get mentorship or advice or access to capital or essentially the benefits of going through an accelerator or having some sort of really professional guidance and help for their startup. And the solution that we have come back to again and again is this concept of a founder intelligence platform, because our ability to deeply understand and deeply guide the founder in what they're doing in a self-serve, very scalable way using our patent pending AI technology um, has a lot of different implications for um, just how accessible and how scalable success really can be. You know, nowadays, the vast majority of founders don't even bother fundraising or making a pitch deck or going through the really heartbreaking and emotionally demanding process of applying for investment or applying to an accelerator program and then getting rejected. Not once, not twice, but hundreds of times over and over and over again. And the only advice people have to them is, oh, well, you just got to keep doing it. It's a numbers game. Well, if you're doing anything and you're getting less than, you know, 10% or 1% success rate, I think you need to question your methods, and I think you need to think about how can I make this process more efficient. So if you're interested in saving all that time and hassle of making pitch decks, if you're interested in saving all the time and hassle of trying to constantly um, convince people through essentially just words or essentially just a story that they should work with you in whatever capacity, I would encourage you to check out SIFT, because I think SIFT has some uh, some of the most modern tools or some of the most modern approaches to communicating value and communicating um, what a founder brings to the table to a startup ecosystem, such as an accelerator or an investor or even another teammate. So, yeah, if you're a founder who's tired of applying to random accelerators and constantly getting rejected by people who probably you're pretty sure haven't actually looked into or thought deeply about what you're building, and maybe haven't even looked at your pitch deck because they have so many to review, I'd encourage you to check out SIFT and see the way that we're changing how early stage entrepreneurship is done and how SIFT is changing how accessible it is for people to become successful in building their own business.